Welcome to Piper's How I Grew My Brand with me, Mary Nightingale. Today I'm with Jasper Cuppaidge, founder of Camden Town Brewery, the man responsible for making beer sexy and for putting craft beer well and truly on the global map. In fact, he says he's spent his whole life getting into trouble with beer, starting at boarding school in his native Australia. Welcome, Jasper. Where I understand you actually did start making your own beer.
I don't think I made it at school, but I definitely made it away from school. I was at boarding school in Brisbane, and obviously Queensland, a state that's passionate about beer because it's so tremendously hot. So on weekends I would go back home and make illicit brews that I don't think were very good. I don't know if I actually ever drank them, but I definitely remember making them. But yeah, that DNA of loving beer definitely came from a hot climate of home, for sure.
Did your parents welcome the fact that you were making beer? Was it something that you had to kind of do on the quiet?
Yeah, very much so. I don't think, probably my dad was probably thought, probably gave me a stern word, but probably deep down was probably very excited that I was getting into beer at a young age. But we're not talking super young. I wasn't like 12. I would have been 16 or 17. Yeah. I think a lot of people in beer home brewed. I think, and if you talk to a lot of people that I've met over the years in beer, everyone somewhere along has had some sort of touching point with beer, be it home brewing, be it the first thing they drank, be it the first thing they had socially. So, yeah, it goes back a long time with me, that's for sure.
Well, it's in your blood, isn't it, arguably? Because didn't your grandfather have a history of running pubs? And was he brewing as well, or did he just run the pub?
Yeah, my grandfather, Laurie, who unfortunately I never got to meet, but I didn't really even know about this until I actually decided to brew in London. But he owned a brewery called McLaughlin's Brewery in Rockhampton. And then when I started thinking about brewing in London, my mother said, your grandfather had a brewery. I didn't realise how big it was. It was actually quite substantial. It supplied like northern Queensland from Rockhampton to the further parts of Australia. And yeah, again, I guess maybe it was in my blood.
Craft beer, it's a term everyone now knows, isn't it? We're very familiar with that. But how would you actually define it? What does it mean?
I think when we started out, craft was a word that was coming into the industry. We were built as a new brewery or a microbrewery, I guess, were the terms that were going about when we started. And even though we don't classify ourselves as a craft brewery, we're a good brewery, we're a new brewery or a microbrewery. I guess we look at ourselves as craft people. You look at everything and granularly. So you look at where your grain comes from and who malts it, or who grows your hops and how do they look after it? Are they organic? How are they treated? How are they harvested? Or even all your brewing steps and processes all the way through from end to end, like a pair of shoes, you'd consider the box and the leather and the stitching and the paper and everything.
So it's an attention to detail, it's caring.
Exactly. I think that's how we look at it, definitely, because every part of a brewing process matters. The label on the bottle matters when you've got it in your hand, that the amount of carbonation of beer matters, how it presents in a glass. All those things are considered. And I think that's true craft brewing, is that you're thinking about every element in detail, because the grain to glass is a big, big, big piece.
When you were a little boy, were you ambitious?
If I look back on I was terrible at school. Not terrible as in a sense I didn't get into trouble, but I wasn't academically.
Not academic, right.
I didn't do very. I'm dyslexic. Looking back at my school years, even though I had a wonderful time, I love the school that I went to. I love the friendships that I made. I love even the teachers that I went to, but I didn't learn anything. And I still don't understand that why, because actually if I read something I can take that in and grasp it, but at school maybe it wasn't the way I was being taught, wasn't engaging to me, but yet the environment I was in was really fun. I always thought, because I was at a private boarding school, so I was going to be a lawyer, but I'd never got the results to get me to university, right? So I never could understand why. So I never really knew what I was going to do. And so I came out of school, I didn't get into university and just started working. And I guess I worked in many things that I found interesting, things that I found boring, and then stayed in the things that I enjoyed, and then ultimately earned enough money to take myself away to do something, because I loved skiing. And so I took myself skiing in Canada and learned to be a ski instructor and got into something that I really enjoyed and wanted to excel at it and take it. And I guess that's something that I've really, throughout my career, I've kind of found things I've really loved and tried to get to maybe not to the best. And I read a wonderful book yesterday by the gentleman who started Patagonia, and he said he was an 80-20 guy, where he gets to 80% of something and he knows he can't get any better, so he moves on to the next thing. And I think that's kind of a bit like myself. I like to dive into something and understand it and take myself up to a level that I really feel I'm great at, but then maybe I'm never going to be world class at it. But I still go back to it. I love going back to skiing when I can, but I love doing, my favourite job, started off as a glass collector. I still love that. When I interview everyone in the business that I run now, I always tell them I'm the best glass collector we have in this business. I love going back to the things that I've started, I've excelled at. I don't like doing things that I'm not good at. So but the things that I love doing, that I've become okay at, I really enjoy going and doing again.
What did your parents expect you to do? do you think? Did they expect?
No, I mean, I'm very close with my mother, and my mother never had put pressure on me to be anything. I think she knew that whatever I did, that I'd be happy. And I think my mother's always been happy for me to be a happy person, and she brings that to me. And she's always put disciplines around me to make sure that I don't, go off track. I think she's obviously very proud of where I've got to and what we've done. But no, there was never, you must go into this or you must go into that. I think she knew that I'd find something that I really enjoyed.
Yeah. So you came over to England, and there's a story in that, of course, because you missed your flight home, right?
That's right. I'd been surfing in Mexico, and I was on one of those Australian World Global tickets where you tick off countries like boxes, and I was on my way through London because I had to stop here. I had no desire to stay because there was no surf here. I'm not really interested in cold water. I like warm water. So I was on my way off to Africa to surf even further. And lo and behold, I went to an opening of a restaurant and met some friends, and I missed a flight home and ended up getting a job there collecting glasses. And that was my first day in the hospitality industry, and that's which I fell in love with immediately. Within a day of doing it, I was like, "Wow, this is great." Not looking at London, this is my career. I just loved going into work with a spring in my step every day. Missed another flight, or didn't actually even try to get to the next flight, but just decided that was my calling, and then started working at the Westbourne in Notting Hill at the beginning of the kind of food revolution, and just fell in love with the industry, and here we are today.
And met your partner.
I did. I met Lila there, funnily enough, and. At the Westbourne, and then we've been. There's like, gosh, it feels like just the other day, but it's a long, long time ago, 22, 23 years ago. So yes, I did.
So how did you go from that glass collecting to then brewing the beer, and how did that career actually happen? Because it doesn't happen by accident. There has to be more planning to it than that, surely.
For me, it was like taking myself through self-education. I like doing this, and then I could see there was another job, so I wanted to be a bartender, and how do you do that? So I was a bar back, and I guess I progressed from the ground up, working, all through all the levels, glass collector, bartender, floor manager, general manager, the usual kind of traits, and then to working for other people, and ultimately always never happy with who was above me, hence the reason why I wanted to do their job. I could do it better, so I'll continue to work until I get those roles. And then ultimately the next role was being my own boss. So then I looked around and I found my own venue, and I bought the Horseshoe up in Hampstead.
And the timing was good, wasn't it? Because as you said, it was right at the beginning of the sort of food revolution, and pubs were very different then. Yeah,
definitely. Yeah, it was a wonderful time in food because it was being discovered.
And craft beer was not popular or ubiquitous or really widely known then, was it? That was something new as well.
That's right. There was no beer. I mean, there was obviously the globals, and there were wonderful old traditional regionals. But Lila is a photographer and was working in New York quite a lot, and so I was travelling out there to see her, and Brooklyn Lager had just started, and I was completely fascinated with Brooklyn, and so I went to Brooklyn and met Steve Hindy, the founder of Brooklyn, and their labelling was wonderful and their beers were just as wonderful, but I didn't feel that was happening over here. You could get wonderful beer, but they couldn't get a wonderful brand. So I decided that I'd build a brewery. I'm going to make something interesting. I'm going to build a brewery because I'm going to build a brewery in the basement, because you could get wonderful wine and you get great coffee from Caravan, say, roasted around the corner, get great cheese from Patricia at the fromagerie. But when it came to beer on the Horseshoe, I could get nothing that I was interested in that I could talk about. So I decided, well, if I can't get it, I'll make it.
And that was the start of Camden, right?
Or McLaughlin's at first, but then it was Camden, yes.
Yes, OK, because Max was taken as the name was, right?
Yeah,
okay.
Right.
You mentioned the B word, brand, there for the first time. And I want to bring in your father-in-law, John Hegarty, Lila's dad, of the advertising agency Bartle Bogle Hegarty, who joined you at the beginning too. I mean, this man is the king of brand. How did you luck out with your father-in-law? Because he really helps you right at the beginning, didn't he?
Yeah, I mean, I've been very lucky. I've fallen into a wonderful family. Elliot, Lila, Kari and John have been so supportive of me. And I remember when I did the Horseshoe, John was like, well, let me invest in it. And I was like, no, I don't want you to invest in it, because if it goes bust, I'm going to sit at the Sunday lunch table and I've lost all your money. So I'm not, but he's like, no, don't be silly. Let me help you. So he did invest in the Horseshoe, only a small percentage of it. But he's always been, I guess, more than an investment. He's always been there for time. He's always been able to talk to me about brand, and I never really understood the importance of brand. And it was him who really helped me think, or channeled my thoughts to sort of come up with the brand.
So you got a mentor, really. Yeah. How important is it, do you think, when you're starting out to have a mentor as an entrepreneur?
Oh, it's very lonely being an entrepreneur, I think. I mean, that, it's very, you're making a lot of decisions all the time on your own. So to have someone who's a sounding board or just someone to talk to is for me, it was very important. If I look back, it was probably one of the most important things. I was very lucky with the Horseshoe that my three best friends who were very successful joined me as well, and they were kind of indirectly mentors as well. So I always had, depending on what the problem was, I always had someone to go and reflect with.
So what business were your friends in?
So they were in bars. So there was a team called Barworks. So there was Andreas, Mark and Patrick who owned a collection of really exciting bars in London at the time and still today. And they came on as a partner into Camden at a very early age. And they were, I guess, they were a different part of the mentoring process, but they were there. They weren't there every day, but if I needed any of them, I could always call on them for a coffee or a discussion, or should we do this or should we do that? You
said that you didn't understand about brands until John Hegarty explained to you. Can you remember what he said about brands? How did he explain the concept of brand to you?
He'd always say the value is in the brand because everything falls off it. And so I didn't really know at the beginning what it really stood for or cared for what it stood for. I just knew what we were doing was important. But then, and I think it's the way we went about finding out about what we stood for was super important. But him always saying, you need to understand what it stands for. And I guess from now it's been very important for the team.
So explain to me, what is your brand?
Gosh, I should know this off the top of my head.
You really should. Come on.
It's proud, simple and strong, I guess, is how we've always been. And I guess, and being from Camden, how do you wrap up Camden? Because the brewery's right in the middle of it. How do you wrap up such an area into a brand where it's, people go, oh, well, it's thunderbolts and lightning and, it's goth and it's mods and it's everything in between. But Camden is that. I guess it's an area and a brewing company that is open and accessible and it's got an energy. I think that's what the wonderful thing about the we embrace of Camden, the diversity of it. You can be a lawyer, a goth, a barrister, a surfer, and 18 or 80 and be in Camden and listen to music and no one cares. You don't have to stand for anything, but everyone, as long as you're having a good time, you're welcome in Camden. I think that's what our brand's always stood for, that it's accessible.
Was it pure chance that you ended up in Camden?
Pure, absolutely. Yeah, like I landed in Camden with Lila. We had a flat on Camden Square, and that's the where the name came from. Like I said, it was going to be called Max, and I was searching www.camdentownbrewery.com. Do you want to register the domain for £1.50? And I was like, well, yeah, that sounds like a great name for a brewery because we're right here. It's going to be in Camden, so yeah, it makes sense.
2010, okay, business flourishing. Sales were growing by 70% a year. And you moved to the Arches, didn't you, under Kentish Town West Station. How did you handle this astonishing pace of growth?
When you reflect on it, it was just normality, right? We were growing. When we built the brewing company and we were doing a 1 year and 3 year plan, we're like, well, if we can be in 100 venues and we can do in one keg a week and 100 venues, success is ours. How fantastic. And within 3 months, we were in 200 venues doing 5 kegs a week. And what are we going to do? And I think that was timing was wonderful. The people I had around me were wonderful. But most importantly, what we were making was fantastic.
Now, as you know, this series of podcasts is all about growing businesses, developing brands. And the way Piper sees it is that there are a series of step changes, which they call 7-17-70. They're sort of inflection points, if you like, in the growth of a business, be it in turnover, number of employees, or perhaps number of sites. So would you agree with that?
Yeah, I guess you could look at them from a people or a revenue perspective for us. And so the people's probably the easiest thing because I could see them. We were 7 people when we started. Yeah, those days were fun and free, I guess, at the beginning, but we did everything together. So a brewer would be a driver or a person in the office could be a brewer. We were all multi-talented and multi-rolled, and some of those people are still in the brewery today. So, and then 17 people, definitely, that's it's a fair size business for a small business. There's more people to talk to who are working at different times of the day. I think when we went to that sort of stage, we would have been brewing through the evenings, so the brewery needed to work later. So it wasn't, whereas everything, the reason I started Camden was to be everyone under one roof, and I guess now it started having people working at different times of the day when I wasn't there. So how do you make sure you start communicating with those people? So you start doing different things, having weekly get-togethers to make sure that everyone's on the same page. And then ultimately, when you move on to the next, when it's bigger, 70 was probably the chapter before we started joining AB. It was probably a huge change in us because we had a new facility new people, and that's probably when we put an HR department in, because making sure that even though we thought we were doing a great job with our the team, we may not have been. Communication would probably be the big thing across all those stages, because the message, how do you make sure that the message of why you started, to be the greatest lager brewery in the world, is ringing true to the new driver who you're not seeing because he's working at night time, who's just as important as the managing director. So messaging across the business was definitely the challenges as we got bigger. But I think, as better people joined us, they helped me to define how we should make that happen.
You're listening to the Piper podcast, How I Grew My Brand, with Jasper Cuppaidge, founder of Camden Town Brewery. Now, in 2015, you took the decision, didn't you, to seek investment from crowdfunding to help you build a new brewery. It's become now quite a popular route, of course, but it's not without its challenges or indeed its controversies, is it? How did you find the process?
I didn't enjoy it because I didn't really understand funding and financing. That wasn't my side of the business. I wasn't, I'm a very customer-driven person rather than a financial-driven person. And I think when we launched on Crowdcube back in the day, I think we've still got the most questioned valuation to date. It was thousands of people saying, "How are you worth this? What are you doing?" And so it was almost like inviting everyone in who I didn't know, people just questioning our beliefs. And so it was a real opening up of who I was as a person to the world on a social media platform, which is pretty
exposing, isn't it?
Yeah, it was. And so I enjoyed the raise of it, and I enjoyed the excitement of it. But then once it was it was all done, we ended up raising the most amount of money you could over that you're allowed to do, and then had to shut it. And then just was like, well, hold on a minute, I've got 3,500 or 2,500 investors who've got access to talk to me. And and I'm dyslexic, so I used to get hundreds of emails, and I'm like, oh my God, I can't write. What am I going to do? So it was not understanding, I guess, being a bit, a bit naive, is probably when I reflect back on it.
The target was 1.5 million. You exceeded it by 183%. So you raised 2.75 million with 3,000 investors. You paid them back. I mean, they really made a great call, didn't they, with their crowdfunding? It was a great investment.
Yeah, they did. Yeah, they did. And I've had lots of wonderful emails from people saying that I've started businesses off the back of this. I used the money that I invested, and we believed in you, and thank you. I mean, obviously we had some derogatory pieces, but we've had a lot more people coming up and saying thank you for what we've done. So we did. I guess ultimately you invest in people to make a return, and that's what we did. We safeguarded their money and then gave them a handsome return quite quickly. So yeah,
you sure did, because in December 2015 you sold the business, didn't you, to AB InBev, the world's biggest brewer.
That's right.
But that was not without controversy in itself, was it? So tell me about it. How did you decide to go and do that?
I felt the only way to grow our brand was to partner with someone, from a brand perspective. But I always thought it would be a brewing company because they'd understand the ups and downs of the industry. And so I always thought, well, I want to partner with an expert. We weren't looking to do it. We funded. We'd set the lease up for Enfield. We'd put the deposit down on the Crohn's.
Enfield being your brewery.
Then the second site that we have now out in Enfield. And so we'd got the lease. We'd put a deposit down on the new equipment from Crohn's in Germany, and we were full steam ahead. And then they said, would you like to partner with us? And I didn't really, again, being naive, I thought they were coming to me to talk about a distribution deal. And I was like, well, it'd be wonderful to meet you. Why don't we talk? And so then they came to us and they talked about working together and how they'd like to do it and how we'd like to do it. And the relationship started then.
But you didn't even know what M&A was at that point, did you?
No, I didn't. I had to find it. There's a lot of acronyms now. Acronyms I didn't know what was either. There's a lot of acronyms within AB. And that was one of the things when we started working with them. I said, look, guys, it's when we get through this deal, we've all got to be friends. So let's make this. Let's make this as interesting, as professional as we possibly can, but also the acronyms have to stop. Listen, I've got an eye for detail. So all the things that I run and own, I understand a P&L, I understand a 3 and single year plan for our business. But things that I don't have an interest in, like an M&A, I had no understanding of because I wasn't looking to do it. I'm well aware of what an M&A is now because I've done one, and I've definitely, which was a really interesting experience.
Was it?
Yeah, it was. I met some wonderful people, and some of the people from the AB side have become really great friends of mine, and then also some of the professionals, Daljit and Rob, from RSM have become a great friend of mine because he said it was one of the funniest M&As he's ever done. So probably from being so naive, right? So, but yeah, no, it was a really, really good experience. But off the back of that, I created some really strong partnerships within ABI, which is what I was trying to do, because ultimately I really believed in the brand that we were creating, and I still do today. I think there's a huge amount of white space for it, and the reason I took it to ABI and joined them was so that we could grow it to the level I really believed it could get to.
There's quite a lot of criticism out there, wasn't there?
Yeah.
Because you had created this brand which was kind of, gifted amateur almost, an enthusiast and a family and a little bit idiosyncratic and, not playing by the rules, and then you went big.
I mean, it was rightly so. I think the questions that really rung true were, was I going to disappear? Are the beers going to be changed? And they were the ones that I was, really considerate about, and they're the ones I really answered. All the nonsensical abuse that was, not very well thought out, I wasn't that bothered with. The social media piece didn't worry me that much. It was the team that I was really concerned about. By that stage, we were 100 in the company, and I had to announce it to them. And there were tears, and there were, people resigning, and that was probably the hardest piece of it.
Really,
Yes,
people resigned.
Yeah, well,
because they feared what it would do to.
Yeah, they thought that we weren't the brewery that we were before, right? And so we did lose quite a few people at the beginning, but a lot of people stayed, and they've seen an even better Camden. I think our beers have won more awards since we joined AB, and not because of our relationship with AB, it's because we've got better and been allowed to get better. We've got a better people policy. We hire, we train. People. I remember doing a thing with Claire, who's the head of people, and she put her hand up and said, "Who has had any training at Camden since we've been here?" And not one person put their hand up. If you did that today, probably 80% of the people, everyone at Camden's had some form of, beer school training, management training. So there's been, lots of improvements in the last 4 or 5 years.
But you did, even some of your peers in the business, I'm thinking Brewdog, though the implication was you've sold out and they weren't going to sell your beers anymore.
Yeah, no, James did, obviously that was a message that James sent to us and ended up trending for days and days and days. And I mean, James is very, very good at marketing and PR. And
was it all spin then?
Yeah.
It was a good line.
Yeah, it was. But it didn't make us it didn't worry me or concern us as a business, because I knew we'd chosen the right and made the right decision, to continue the growth of what Camden stood for in the first place. And those changes and that decision hasn't changed today. We're still doing exactly what we did 4 years ago, but we're doing it even better. But those comments are good. They keep you on your toes. And, it was a bit of a storm in a teacup, and we've moved on, and now we've got more and more fans on social media than we've ever had before, and more people drinking Camden than ever before, and winning more awards than we've ever won before. So we must be doing something right.
And you and your friends, your partners, owned 95% of the business, so you did okay as well, right?
Yeah. Well, they're lucky they are my best friends, and
they are now.
They certainly are now. So no, everyone. But listen, growing a capital-intensive business is a risk. But, I risked everything to build something right. And I think, a lot of people come into brewing who open a brewery and you can do it for, £100,000. Well, we spent £2.5 million building Camden down in Camden, because we needed incredible equipment to make the beer that we needed to make. And so, if it went wrong, it went wrong. And so they entrusted in me and backed me every single day of the week until we exited. So, they are very happy, and we're still very good friends.
How are you with risk? You don't strike me as a sleepless nights kind of guy.
No, I'm not a gambler. No, but I'm committed to.
But do you worry?
Opportunity.
Do you worry? Do you get scared? Did you become anxious?
Yes. Not about growth. I get anxious about things within the business. How are the people? How's it working? How are our customers? They're the things that worry me. How's the service in the Horseshoe? What's the food like on a Sunday? They're the things that get me worried. I don't get worried about business because I wouldn't grow it if I didn't think it could be grown. So the opportunity doesn't make me anxious, but situations and problems make me anxious. How can I improve them? And I think that's because I want to make it great, on everything. How our trucks look, it upsets me if I see them. How can we make them look better? How the uniform's not right. They're the things that get me anxious. And now when you get a bigger and bigger team, how do you make sure that still translates across? So I worry about things, but it doesn't keep me up at night. But I worry about how do I make it better as we grow and continually improve it.
And where are you now? How many people do you employ? What's the turnover?
So we're about 200, just short of 200 people now in the brewing company. Revenue-wise, we're about between 60 and 70 million pounds a year. So considerable. From where we started in the brewing arches, sort of 7 or 8 years ago. So and those you can almost rate people. People and turnover are kind of the similar thing, and we've been growing at the same sort of percentages ever since we started.
How do you find though the change in role now? You're a small cog, I guess, in an enormous wheel. You're no longer founder. Well, you are still the founder, but you've become the CEO now. What about the change in role?
You go through chapters within any career, I think, and I'm turning a new chapter at the moment. I think, AB, they've got a way of working which is different, to us. Our reporting is definitely different to what it used to be. We do a lot more of it. But, that's a bit like the 80-20 piece, but for that 20 more that we do, we've got more in the 80 as well. So, my role now is more and more keeping the business honest and mentoring the people who are running it, the leaders who started behind me as managers who are now MD or now directors. My role now is to challenge and to make sure we continue to grow and challenge the rights and the wrongs of the business to the guys who are leading. Because every time I've interviewed probably, we're nearly 200 people, and I must have interviewed maybe 80% of the people who are in there, maybe even 90% of the people who have come through the business. And, I've always said to them, if you're coming into this and you want a career, you should be going after my job, ultimately. And if I find that person who wants it, then I'll step down as soon as I can, because, that means there's someone in there who's after it. And, I'm enjoying it because I'm not doing as much, in a sense. I'm there the same amount of hours, but I'm not doing as much of the mental arithmetic in my mind of how we're going to grow this thing on my own anymore. Now I'm sharing that with a lot of other people. Even though we've got 2 facilities, I can walk both facilities from end to end, be that from the finance team to the brewing team, and talk to them. So I spend a lot of time in the industry, in our industry, as in my business, and also out in the industry, sort of listening to what people are doing, meeting people who are, the next Camdens or the next restaurant groups of the country.
You no longer have a stake in the business, I think. Is that right?
No stake.
What does keep you there? Because you could walk away, you could start again.
Yeah, I could. I've got something that's successful, and I love being there, and to stop and start again and get committed to that. It's dedication. It's 100% of mind thinking about, what you're doing every single moment that you're awake. And I've got other things that I want to think about these days, like a family and, and the team that I've already got. So, I'm not driven to do another one. I love the one I've got, and I love the family I've got. So I'm going to, continually, hopefully, be value to the business I've got. Maybe one day they'll change the locks and they won't want me to come in anymore. But at the moment, I still think I bring value and expertise to the business that I'm in.
How difficult a call was it to sell? It was your baby. Was there ever any sort of emotional...
No, nothing. I think of the relationship that I built with the people we sold to was so important. So if they'd been awful through the M&A, I probably would have regretted every minute of it. But actually, I felt like we'd found the place that we were meant to be in. If you look at the beer industry, it's quite cliquey, and we were making lager, whereas everyone was making skulls and crossbones and IPAs, and we were doing... in essence, trying to compete with the Peronis and the Stellas of the world. And so we're kind of setting our own kind of agenda. So actually, there's 30-odd breweries like us within AB, and it's a bit like being in a small restaurant group. There's events that we can get to. There's people who come to us. We host things. So, there's a lot going on that's not just about being acquired. It's actually joining something.
It's a great success over a really quite short period of time. Were there ever dark moments? Was there ever a batch of beer that went horribly wrong and you had your head in your hands and you thought, I can't do this anymore? It can't have all been
hundreds.
Fabulous.
No, hundreds of moments where just like joining AB I don't have any regrets. However, it was one of the worst days of my brewing career, talking to people about it, the social media insight, the team resigning, I seem to have more leaving parties than welcoming parties, for months. Plenty of dark days. We blew the brewery up, it caught on fire. There's been lots of moments where it's, and just the challenges of, in an industry that's so, it's been around a long time, the beer industry in England, so pushing on doors to try and make it happen. So, and why do it? I remember when we first started, I was on holidays after about 18 months of being, from the brewery opening, first batches. I took off my first holiday and I went away, and the brewmaster rang me and said, do you want to know the good news or the bad news? And the bad news is every single tank in the brewery is infected. And I was like, great. And the good news is, well, we've dumped everything and we're going to start again. And I was like, and we found the problem. I think so. We've had definitely, when we're an unpasteurized brewing company, probably the largest unpasteurized lager brewery company in the world, and that takes a lot of hard work and dedication. It's a lot easier to pasteurize a beer to put it to market, and we don't, because we want to make sure that we get the freshest, most intense flavor, a natural flavor of our beer, and that's a way that we work, and that takes huge amounts of work. So holding, having orders going to supermarkets and you're delayed because something hasn't come through, a result that you're waiting on because you won't release a beer until that's done, so it ticks off a box. So there's moments in time where there's not enough hours in the day to work it. So yeah, it's even though there's from an outside there's a beautiful part of Camden, and don't get me wrong, it is. There's 80-20, but there's definitely 20% of pain, which it makes the business what it is today. The challenges of growth, which I enjoy. I think if we were I always say when we're if we're not growing, we're dying. But they come with huge challenges and sleepless nights and moments of of concern. But yeah, no, they've definitely had plenty of them.
What about your advertising and marketing? I mean, you had the expert, obviously, in your father-in-law. But have you done a piece of that you're particularly proud of?
We've done lots of really interesting work. I thought, obviously we did Hell's Razor for the Crowd Cube, which worked really, really well. From a brand perspective, we've done wonderful work graphically. I think we're really strong. I think we've been really disciplined. We've got a very good tone of voice. I work with a really, really great group of people, and there's a wonderful girl called Zoe who's been with us, who I met at St Martin's. She was 25 and she's been with us ever since, and she's done our brand and she's been given articulate license to just do it. I challenge her all the time. We work very close together, but she's done an incredible job. And she said to me the other day, every single part of this brand, be it a blog, a tweet, message on social media, anything has been written by a woman, and that's her and her team. You don't really realise how great it is until you kind of walk away from it and look. And I think so from a brand perspective, we've done some wonderful things. From marketing, I think we've got a long way to go. I think we've got, and that's the next stage of our business. How do we actually start talking about ourselves in a better way? And
your plan is to be the best brewery in the world.
Yeah, best lager brewery in the world.
Best lager brewery
and I think
in the world.
Never the biggest. I don't want to be the biggest brewery in the world, but if we could be like the most loved, the best lager brewery in the world, because lager's had this, everyone, even though it's the world favourite beer, right? 75% of the world if they drink beer, they drink a lager, but everyone doesn't like a lager. It's like, oh, I don't drink lager swagger. But actually, it's a wonderful style of beer. So we want to try and become most favourite, the best lager brewery. I guess it's favourite lager brewery in the world.
And what advice would you give to your younger self?
It's all going to be okay in the end. Yeah, probably. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, it's all going to work itself out.
Jasper Cuppaidge, lovely talking to you.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.